Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dollar-Coltman. I am joined by Elliott Tanti and Braydon Dollar-Coltman. Braydon, we know that you are on a telephone. Is this because you are currently in your Battle of Alberta bunker preparing for what is going to be a very dramatic couple weeks in the province of Alberta now that we know that Calgary and Edmonton will be facing off in the second round of the NHL Playoffs?
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I am doing. I am preparing my bunker with all of the proper orange and blue colors to ensure that people... Oh, they're screaming outside. It's already started.
The end is nigh. All right, let's get to it. Let's get to it. Here's topic one. All right, well, we knew we had to start here. We're a day late, but not a penny short after what was an absolutely just off the chain dramatic finale to what was a great first round of the playoffs for the Edmonton Oilers. We will talk about the other series and the other parts of the NHL. This is an all NHL episode. Obviously, we'll talk about round two when we get to topic three, but let's start with the Oilers. Let's dedicate a topic to them. We are huge Oiler fans. Anyone who listens to the show knows that we came into this series with a lot of very high expectations. We did an episode last week where the expectations were starting to become a little bit more muted, a little bit more cautious because it was a very contentious and drawn out series. It made it all the way to Game 7, and Connor McDavid absolutely went to town on just what had been a really great LA Kings team up to that point. And in the last two games, they kind of finally, they looked human again. And Jonathan Quick looked human again. And the Edmonton Oilers found ways to play defense and band together, and they win the series. Elliott, I know, you've watched every minute of it so far. What are your feelings post round one for the Edmonton Oilers? You had some worries, you had some concerns. How do you feel now?
Really glad, really happy. I think this was my goal for the team this year. I felt they needed to win one series, and they've done that. And that for me just makes me feel a lot better. So that's good. It was a great series in that I think when Edmonton played their game, the way that they know how to play it and they needed to play it, they were the better team. I felt that they were the better team for a better part of 5 of those 7 games, but got a little unlucky or bad breaks here or there. And that's good. They were a higher rated seed, and so they played to the level that they should have. Heading into round 2, I still have concerns about goaltending. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. And it's very clear that Leon Draisaitl is very hurt. But I think all in all, really pleased with how the team ended the series, and obviously getting the victory. Would have liked it to maybe been 6 games, but you know what? You can't complain after a series win, and especially after the history that we've had with this team for the last 15 years.
Braydon, obviously you two were excited, but I think maybe a little bit more so than Elliott. You were pretty convinced that this team had this in them. I don't think you were quite as nervous going into it as he was. Maybe that's unfair to sort of put on you, but they met your expectations, obviously. How do you feel to a day after, now that you've kind of digested what was a very exciting game? Yeah.
I feel fantastic. It's like Elliott said, it's the pressure of getting through the first round is off. So you can look at that as being a success. Obviously you want to continue moving forward through the playoffs and through the rounds, but it's a different kind of a look when you get bounced out of the first round with such high expectations. So just fantastic to see the team rally to be able to pull out a series win like that. And I think the momentum of that, I'm a little bit, I think it's going to be really exciting to see Calgary and Edmonton battle. I'm a little disappointed we lost that home ice advantage moving into the second round, but because that certainly helped our cause in the first round.
It certainly did. But the Oilers obviously also played well on the road. I can speak to that. I went on a crazy little adventure on Thursday to go to Game 6. Something that I was very excited. I had the opportunity to do, it was really exciting to be in the building. I know, Elliott, you were there for Game 1. It's a different atmosphere in the building. You feel the adrenaline a little bit differently than you do sitting at home on the TV, where you get all the replays and sort of the analysis throughout the way. It's definitely weird to be in the away building. I want to give full credit to the Los Angeles Kings fans in that building. It was loud. It was raucous. I know that it was as exciting as Game 6 was on TV, I'm telling you, in the building, it was just as exciting. And for me, obviously, more so being on the winning side of it, it was tougher for the LA Kings fans. But what a great series! At the end of the day, we knew going in that LA and Edmonton matched up well based on their season series. They had been tight, contested games. LA plays a very strict sort of structure that makes it difficult for teams to get good zone entry, to maintain opportunities, and they just shoot the puck like every single time it's in possession, it's on the net, and that certainly boded well for them in games 4 and 5. But Edmonton sort of stuck it out and figured a way to work through some of their early struggles, some of the things that they were overcoming. That's what you want to see in a playoff series. How many of these series, we'll talk about it in a second, but how many of these series go to Game 7? A lot of them. This is what the NHL playoffs is. You have to be able to weather some adversity, weather the storm, figure out what your opponent is. Look, there's nothing like playing the same team 6-7 times in like 8-9 days. That's insane. That's just the level of intensity and competition that ramps up throughout the week as the teams get to know each other and understand what's going on there better, the rhythms of it. You have both goaltenders have nights they'd like to forget on both sides, and yet they also still stand on their heads in other games. Like, it's just it's awesome. Like, this is what you live for. Mind you, as fans, you got to pace yourselves here, because this is round 1, and if it's going to go a long way, I'm not sure how much more heartburn medication I can get at one time from a pharmacy. But my goodness, let's just round this out really quickly. What did you learn, Elliott, about the Edmonton Oilers that you didn't know going into round 1 that now going into round 2? Good, bad, or indifferent? What did you learn from this series?
There's 2 things for me. One is Connor McDavid apparently has a 10th gear that can emerge. I mean, he was otherworldly, particularly in Game 6 and Game 7. Literally put the team on his back.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think is a little bit more nuanced and might be like more important is that Kyler Yamamoto is a playoff performer. He was great from the start of the series straight through to the end. When we saw him in Winnipeg last year, he looked undersized, as he is undersized. It didn't seem like his game really matched up for NHL level quality playoffs. But that was not the case. He was one of the best Oilers on the team throughout this entire series, start to finish. And that's really exciting for our team moving forward.
Braydon, lessons learned?
Yeah, I'm really impressed with Yamamoto. Also really impressed with the compete level of Mike Smith. We saw it coming into as the playoffs were starting, but also, through 7 games, you want to see that a little bit more solidified moving forward. And I think we're going to see Koskinen a little bit here to give Smitty a bit of rest, but the compete level is still there at 41. He wants it really badly, and then you can see that. The other thing for me is
hold on. What the hell are you talking about? You think they're going to play Mikko Koskinen?
I think they might start him in Game 1. Yeah.
What?
Why would they not? They just spent 7 games. You're going to go another 7 every. You've got 2 goalies here.
Yeah, every team's got 2 goalies. One's hot. You go with the hot guy. Look at what LA did. They could have easily put Cal Peterson in after Jonathan Quick was pulled, but they knew better than that. They knew that they go with the guy who's hot. I'm sorry,
Possibly.
like that's
He's
insane
risk
to me.
Injury if that guy's 41 years old and
then you risk an injury. You ask
Okay.
me. You ask Mike Smith right now if he's willing to
and
risk
did we
an
win
injury
when
to win a
Glenn
Stanley
Rolfson
Cup.
went down, George?
Yeah, in Game 1 and then we didn't have a number 2 then. But regardless, the
This
point
is my
being,
point. What does
you play
Game
the
1
hot
mean?
goalie. You can't be afraid of it. No, you can't. What does Game 1 mean? Braydon, this series could be done and dusted. Look at Winnipeg last year. You don't play
Jordan.
No.
Jordan,
every game now.
Did we win this
forward,
last series? And did we win the first game?
No. But you played Mike Smith and you found out that playing one guy, working the way he's playing, is the only way for him to find success. He loses 2 in a row. Do you go to Mikko then? Nope. You stick with the guy that got you where you are. And at this point, that's Mike Smith. Mike Smith is their goaltender come hell or high water now through the rest of this playoffs, unless he blows like 3 games in a row and they're down 3-0. That's the only situation I see Mikko Koskinen coming in other than an injury. And look, injuries happen, but you can't risk mitigate in the the playoffs. That's just not how you play to succeed.
And
if you were doing that, then Leon Draisaitl wouldn't have played Game 7.
Jordan. I disagree. This is such a long playoffs.
What happens if you
can't run him to the ground?
Yeah, I don't think that's right.
I think that I think we're starting to see a change in philosophy around this. I think every team last year played both their goalies at some point during the playoffs. That being said, I don't think you start Koskinen until you get less than stellar performances from Smith. I think like Smith is the heart and soul of this team. These guys want to win for him too. Like he's too emotionally important for the.
He just came off a shutout in Game 7 to win you a series. You don't put him on the bench. That's insane to me.
Yeah,
Mike Smith is your guy. You're not winning the Stanley Cup this year. You're not making it out of this next round if Mike Smith doesn't play off the chain. That's the only way this works. Mike Smith is the Edmonton Oilers starting goaltender.
I'm not saying he's not the starting goaltender. I'm saying that I don't think you need to start him every single game moving forward. I don't think you need that.
Wow. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think you play your best players. You don't rest Connor just because you're worried about an injury. You're not going to rest Leon, even though he is injured at this point. He's playing because you have to play. If he's capable of playing, he's going to be out there. And at this point, Mike Smith, again, like Elliott said, until he proves otherwise, is their goaltender. And I think that that's there. Anyway, we can table that for a later conversation. You had a second observation. Let's see if it's as on point as that one. Holy, that's the hottest take you have ever had. That is the hottest take you have ever had. You're watching too much like Calgary Flames right now. You're on fire. That's insane. You just like, are you trying to be Stephen A. Smith? What are you on? What are you on? Not playing Mike Smith. He just won you a series.
Yes, he did, Jordan. And they went 7 games.
Yes. And he won 4 of them. He wins the final game of the series in a shutout. You don't sit him for Game 1. Oh my God.
What, you think he's going to
against his former team? Think about the emotion of that.
I think, Jordan, I think you are way overestimating Mike Smith's role in this last series victory. I think in some ways they won in spite of him.
I don't think that's true at all. And I think that the numbers back me up. You look at how many shots LA took throughout that entire series. And even in the games LA's winning, they're winning a 4-0 game. Fine. That's the anomaly there in terms of those situations where Edmonton had absolutely
have in the first 10 minutes of the game. In those last games,
that has nothing.
That's not accounting for quality.
I'm not worried about the shots in the first 10 minutes, Braydon. What I'm worried about is the shots in the third period when you're only having a 1-goal lead and Mike Smith is shutting the door. He's making the big necessary saves. And look, give Edmonton's defense full credit.
My whole point was his compete level. What I'm saying is I want to make sure he's at that level.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, if you sit Mike Smith in Game 1 of this next series, you will not win that series because you will have completely removed all of the momentum, all of that fight that he has in him. He is a guy who has so much pride in what he's doing that he showed you after he made a clear mistake in Game 1. 2 shutouts in the series. How on earth, Elliott, can you tell me they won this series in spite of him? 2 shutouts in the series.
In both those games, the Oilers dominated the Kings and they had no chances. The Oilers were playing their game. If you took the total of this series, I believe wholeheartedly Jonathan Quick was the far better goalie. This series was only tight because of the saves that Jonathan Quick was making, not because of Mike Smith. And
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think you're right. I think Jonathan Quick was a great goaltender, but
he does have 2 shutouts. But I don't think you needed a quality start from Mike Smith. Mike Smith wasn't the reason they won Game 6. It wasn't the reason they won Game 7.
Go back though. No, I don't agree with that because we're talking about the Edmonton Oilers. Go back and look at both the Chicago and Winnipeg series, and bad goaltending in those 2 series is a large reason to why we were swept in them because they did not have the opportunity to bounce back.
I think he played average. I don't think he stole the series.
I'm reeling. I'm just
Mike Smith apologist, man. Mike Smith apologist.
We're watching something different. I don't know, guys.
Jordan, but your argument isn't that my argument isn't that he's not playing well. My argument is that you have to be able you have the longevity. You have to think further ahead.
Yeah, you can't think further ahead. It's the NHL playoffs. In 4 nights, you could be going home.
How many games?
There's no such thing as rest now. There's no such thing as rest now.
7
Period.
games, Jordan. 5
I don't care.
rounds.
You don't.
5 series.
Okay, so it just doesn't work that way, though. You don't rest LeBron James in game 2 because you're worried about maybe not making it to game 7. That's ridiculous. This time I'll be quiet and let you go with this one. What's your other observation before we round out this topic?
I don't even remember, dude. I don't even remember. I mean, I was definitely onto something when I mentioned Jersey was going to be something to watch. But the physicality. This is the thing for me is when the Oilers are pressing physically, that's when their games are on. That's when the opponents are chasing, and that's what we want to be able to see. And Calgary is a highly physical team as well. You saw how many shots they had in this last game 7. So I think if we can get on top of that in terms of our physicality, I'm a little bit afraid moving into this next round how many players of this series will be suspended. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see.
All right, that's topic 1. We'll leave it there. Do you or someone you know own a small business? Are you looking to grow or to reach new customers? Hey, why not let us help? Hattrick is looking for unique brands, businesses, and products to advertise on our show. You can find out how we can help spread the word about your business by contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Well, as I mentioned off the top, I think the NHL is one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting first round of any professional sports playoff format anywhere in the world. Every series, with the exception of maybe one, brought drama. I think 5 of them going to game 7 is phenomenal. You're seeing the compete level of all these teams, the fact that there's a huge amount of parity, the fact that games can be decided, with a 1 goal, or sometimes it's a 5-6 finish, where you've got these teams just absolutely going to town on each other offensively. It's exciting hockey. I don't know how many other series you were able to tune into, guys, but overall, impressions from around the league. We went through in detail in our preview of the playoffs, sort of each series. And, although we weren't right on all of them, I think in a lot of cases, we were definitely onto something when we said how tight some of them were going to be. Let's go through them really quickly and just get your thoughts. We'll start with the one that was over the quickest. This should surprise no one. Colorado, the only team to sweep, obviously beating Nashville. Look, Nashville had some fight in them. They took Colorado to overtime in game 2. But at the end of the day, Colorado has been the best team all season long. Maybe, a little bit of pushback from Florida, but really Colorado's just looked just lethal. And I think Elliott was the one who pointed out the Daryl Sutter quote from a couple weeks back where he said, having to face Colorado in the first round is a waste of 8 days. It certainly was for Nashville. What were your impressions there of the Nashville Colorado series, as brief as it was, Elliott?
I think it came down to what we all figured was the loss of UC Soros in the last game of the season for Nashville was really a backbreaker. You were going to need Jake Ottinger level kind of goaltending for them to even have a chance in this. And that they didn't get that because he wasn't available. And that was really the nail in the coffin. Also, Cale Makar, 12 points in 4 games. That guy is ridiculous, man.
Yeah, as a defenseman. Pretty wild. Speaking of wild, let's jump to that one. Elliott, you were really hot on the Wild. I'm going to let Braydon go first on this one because I know that we also had a bit of a disagreement on how this series was going to go. I can't remember exactly whether I picked St. Louis or the Wild, but I did say that St. Louis's goaltending was going to show up, and they certainly did in a few of these games, including the resurgence of Mr. Bennington. Braydon, thoughts on St. Louis, Minnesota? That went to game 6, and St. Louis obviously pulling it out.
Well, certainly surprised by Bennington. He was not that. He seems to be a playoff performer, and that's kind of when he came on at the beginning of his time. I was surprised to see it seemed like there was they didn't know who to go with, Cam Talbot or Marc-Andre Fleury, and both of them, the expectations were so high and just couldn't get it. St. Louis has been there before, and there's still a lot of that core there, and I think that they just had the edge in this series. That's eventually what it came down to.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, St. Louis has some, like you say, the experience part of it. I don't know, Elliott, you want to jump in here? You were pretty hot on the Wild.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed and surprised that the Wild, were pushed out in 6 games. This is a team that is going to be incredibly hampered for the foreseeable future. They've got a ton of bad contracts, and they've got cap problems for the next little while. And so they loaded up this year and went for it. They went and got Marc-Andre Fleury at the deadline to make a move. And I really thought we expect a little bit more out of them. So I was really, this is the most surprising series for me.
Yeah. So we'll see. Obviously, it was one of those winner gets the worst, sort of prize of all, because now St. Louis will have to take on Colorado. However, that was a great playoff series against the two of them last year. So certainly some bad blood between those two divisional rivals. That will be exciting to see. We'll leave the other Western Conference game for a moment because it just finished. Let's jump over to the East for a second. The series that I think surprised a lot of people in terms of how long it went. I mean, it went to 6 games, Florida and Washington, Florida being the other real powerhouse all season long. They were surprised early by Washington, who won game 1 and then ended up winning game 3 as well to really push Florida back a little bit. But Florida was able to reel off 3 wins after that to win it in 6. So Florida, Washington, any impressions there, Elliott, moving forward? Is Florida looking a little more vulnerable than they did 2 weeks ago?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, you want to talk about how close, the Stanley Cup playoffs and how great it is. Game 4 goes to a overtime game, and Washington had several opportunities to win that game and go 3-on in this up in the series
with a minute left.
Yeah, and they didn't. And Florida ended up winning that game and then ended up taking the series. I think that's the defining moment for me is that overtime victory for the team. Is Florida fallible? Maybe. Washington's a good team. I always judge how you when I'm looking at the opponents, or I'm always thinking about how many guys have been there before and won a Stanley Cup. And there's a core group there in Washington that's won a Stanley Cup and knows how to do it. And Florida maybe doesn't have that kind of experience, but they managed to weather it. I mean, and they got it done in 6 games. So Washington's a good team. So I'm not that down on Florida. I still think Florida's my pick to come out of the East.
Well, let's talk about their next opponent. I think the only prediction I've made all season long that I think still stands is that there's a very good likelihood that a Florida team is the team going out of the East into the finals, because it will either be Tampa Bay or Florida coming out of that division. Tampa Bay and the Maple Leafs. Look, heartbreak for Toronto again, a team that now has, I believe, the NHL and maybe pro sports record for the most consecutive first round losses currently it's the streak. I think they're at 5 consecutive first round losses for Toronto. It's brutal. They just can't get over this hump, and they played very well. I think the most frustrating thing, having spoken to some Leaf fans, Tyler Walzak from Pit Stop on our network being one of them, talking about how this is one of the more frustrating ones, because you can't even be mad at the players. They played amazingly. They just, again, could not get past good goaltending in the end, good sound team. And look, a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. We said this should be the hardest out in the first round. And Tampa Bay took it all the way to 7 as well. Maple Leafs coming out first. It was like the first 3 games, first team to 5 goals would win. And they went back and forth. And, Toronto looked like they had an opportunity there by winning game 5 and forcing, Tampa Bay to have to win 2 in a row. And Tampa Bay did it. So there you go. Braydon, do you have any sympathy for Maple Leafs fans?
Well, I don't know about sympathy, empathy, in that I know what this feels like. Maybe not to the extent of losing, being bounced that often and in so many game 7s. I think they're in a very difficult situation. The pressure just cooking in that city with the media and the expectations are just through the roof. They've put themselves in a position to make it seem like they would go further and further every year, and somehow they're still in the same spot. So I don't know how much changes. I don't know how much they can change. They likely won't have Campbell back next year.
That's kind of the missing piece there, really, isn't it? Is like a bona fide goaltender.
Well, it's interesting because
why didn't they go get Fleury?
Was and then wasn't. Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. What are the things that they could have had at the deadline and missed out on?
But it didn't work out for Minnesota anyway, so who knows? Let me ask Elliott this then. Elliott, we know that if the roles were reversed and the Edmonton Oilers had been bounced last night instead of the Toronto Maple Leafs, all of Canadian sports media outside of Alberta would be asking the simple question: when does Connor McDavid want out? So I'll ask you this: when does Austin Matthews want out? Because they are squandering the absolutely phenomenal career of Austin Matthews, having lost all these things. And look, Austin Matthews will probably win the Hart just because so many Toronto media will have had a vote for it. But you have the MVP of the league and you lose the first round. You got to be asking yourself, when's Austin Matthews want out?
I don't think it's yet. This sort of relates. I'm going to ignore your inflammatory question, and I think that there was lots of expectation on this team this year, and I think it was a lot of people felt like it was do or die. I think Toronto played so well, and they were so close, and because of the opponent that they lost to, I think the calls for changes in the head office and with the coaching staff, at least for now, will subside. I think fans are heartbroken and frustrated, but I think they played well enough to not be. You can't be expecting wholesale change in Toronto.
Did I miss a memo? Did I miss a memo? Is tonight just like hot take corner? What the hell is going on here? You honestly don't think that the fans are going to be calling for Dubas's head now because they had a decent series?
No, Jordan. No, I totally agree with Elliott on this.
I think he's done enough.
The Tampa Bay Lightning. Yeah. Everyone watching that series saw how good the Leafs were in that series, and Tampa Bay was just better. And I don't think that means that Dubas and the whole office needs to change. I do not think that is called for.
I think they got the toughest first round opponent probably in the former 2-time Stanley Cup champions. They took them to Game 7, and 5 minutes left in Game 7, and Vasilevsky had to stand on his head. And they lost. And that's
right. I'm gonna now defer to the actual Toronto fan here who knows what he's talking about and knows what his fan base wants. Let me just read you the texts I got last night from Tyler.
Fan base wants.
Well, he's a lot more in tune with Maple Leafs Twitter than we are.
This is pretty.
He's much more in tune with what Twitter on the Maple Leaf side is than you or I are. He's talking to a lot more fans who are actually there.
Fair.
He says, and he pointed this out, first off, this playoffs did seem different than the others. The Stars actually showed up to play. It felt better in the moment, but coming out of it, tonight feels different. Toronto is burning for change. All Twitter wants is Dubas, Shanahan, and Matthews gone. Matthews gone. That's insane to me personally, but he's telling you that's what the fans are saying. They're pissed. And the thing about it is that you're not going to go trade Matthews. You're not going to do that unless he asks for a trade, because the reality is you're never going to get quality back. But I would not be surprised, considering when you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs as an organization, they are the New York Yankees. They are Ferrari. They are Manchester City. They are the top echelon brand in their sport when it comes to the fan attention, media attention, and the way in which the ownership values and places winning at all costs at the utmost, right? There are a lot of other teams, especially in Canada, who are willing to, plug along and sort of placate their fan base, knowing what they have to work with. Toronto is not that. Toronto is a win at all costs, and they have lost 5 first-round series in a row, and they have tried everything else to try to get here. It's clearly not working. You cannot go into next season status quo. It just won't happen. So you have to ask yourself, are they comfortable enough with the talent on the ice minus a few clear pieces? I agree with you, Braydon. Jack Campbell, I think, is gone. I think they have to find a genuine, bona fide starting goaltender at whatever the price tag is. They will do that. They clearly are missing a couple of those kind of pieces. Look, they have one of the most lethal offenses in the league on their best day, but they need a goaltender. I do not believe, here's my hot take, I don't think Kyle Dubas is sitting tonight very comfortable in his job. I think that the ownership of the Maple Leafs is going to start having hard conversations about whether or not the path that they have gone down has a positive outcome in the end, or if they're only going to see the same things happening. I don't know if it's Shanahan who needs to step in and just sort of take over one more time, and he gets one last shot at this. But the same way Oiler fans were calling for everybody's head in December when they were struggling, Toronto's going to start turning on themselves real fast here. And I think they keep their players. I would even argue they keep their coach for one more go round, because I think Sheldon Keefe did some interesting things with this lineup. But I think Kyle Dubas is probably the first guy out the door. They need somebody fresh and maybe more experience. I don't know what it is, but don't expect Toronto to look the same next year. Their fan base is really, really, really in a bad place. And at the end of the day, they care more about that.
Yeah.
They care more about that.
Yeah, most, of course most they do. But they gotta take a page out of the Oilers book and not just blow everything up because things are you got to kind of stay the course, even though it went to Game 7. That's got to say something. Yeah, they didn't pull it out, but
I'm interested. I know the fan base is mad, and I would be mad too. I mean, we're talking about a fan base that's less than 24 hours after a really heartbreaking, devastating loss. I just think this team did well enough that it will at least keep people in place to the start of next year. I do think that the people in hockey that know hockey would say, look, that was really bad luck, and you guys, any other team, you would have beat them, maybe even Colorado in that first round playing like that. And I don't think I'm not certain.
No, it's a tough one. Let's jump to the last two real quick here, and then we'll get to Calgary. We have Boston and Carolina. I said at the top, I really expected Carolina to just blow Boston out of the water. They clearly didn't. They took them all the way to 7. So Boston, with, again, as Elliott pointed out a couple times already, when you got some guys in there who have been to the top of the mountain, they know what it takes, and they certainly were wily. Here's a weird one for you. I don't know if you noticed this in this series. Every single game won by the home team.
Yeah.
That's an interesting statistic, right? No away wins. And usually to win a series, you got to win an away game. Obviously, in this case for Carolina, they get lucky. They had home ice advantage and it worked out for them. But that was a brutal series. That got ugly. Marchand and Tony DeAngelo, and it definitely some high heat going through that series. But another Game 7 that Carolina pulls out, and we'll see Carolina go on to the second round. Any thoughts there real quick, Braydon?
I was with you. I absolutely thought Boston was going to get destroyed in this series. Marchand kept his team. Patrice Bergeron kept his team afloat, and I was surprised to see that one go to 7. But I think Carolina is still in for a deep playoff run.
Well, speaking of surprises, I think we were also both surprised with how feisty the Penguins were, Elliott. Off the beginning of this series, we kind of had a bit of, well, maybe they're nearing the end of whatever they are. And I think those questions now still remain, having lost in Game 7. But the New York Rangers also, again, a team that came in with a lot of high expectations. They definitely, I think, took a hit to their reputation in terms of how this series ended up going. It'll be interesting to see them against Carolina, considering they were both the favorites, but they both went to Game 7. So there's a lot of pressure on both of them now to sort of move into round 2. But I'll ask you the same question we basically asked you before the series, Elliott. Is this the end of Pittsburgh's core, and are they moving into a rebuild?
Yeah. What do Evgeny Malkin, Brian Rust, Evan Rodriguez, and Chris Letang all have in common? They're all unrestricted free agents heading into next year. So this team is not going to look the same. And there's some massive decisions that need to be made and need to be made fairly quickly here. And I think Sidney Crosby will have a hand in that. This was the final year of that team. And I really enjoyed this series. We got to watch a lot of it because obviously they always carry the Crosby series as that one American series, it seems like. I really enjoyed this series. It was really back and forth. I mean, up until 10 minutes ago, I think Pittsburgh was leading, and New York did leading in Game 7, and New York came back and then obviously won it in overtime. I just, it goes back to that old, I keep saying this and I sound like a broken record. It's so hard to beat teams that have won championships.
Yep.
This is another example of that. And that was my apprehension. I think I actually picked Pittsburgh to win this series, so I was wrong. But I certainly anticipated a tough series for New York, and that's exactly what they gave them, man. What happens next year with Pittsburgh is very interesting. I'm looking at you. If you have a chance, look at their cap friendly. There's a lot of gaps that they're going to need to fill. And some big names that
and that's why they're on the radar as one of those teams that could be looking for a guy like an Evander Kane or somebody else who's kind of come out of the woodwork this season and had a really good playoffs. You never know, that could be one of those attractive markets for them. Let's jump to the last series, the one that sets up the Oilers' opponent, Dallas Calgary. This was one of the tightest, lowest scoring series in the entire first round, especially the first 2 games, which were both shutouts going each way. 1-0 for Calgary, then 2-0 for Dallas. They split the 2 games in Dallas as well, 4-2, pardon me, in game 3, 4-1 in game 4. Game 5 is a 3-1 game. Game 6 is a 4-2, but an empty netter. So it's really a 3-2 game when you look at it, game 6 there. And then tonight, obviously, is a 3-2 game in overtime for game 7. Calgary prevails. Calgary went into this as the division leader. Again, I think much like in the case of a Carolina or a New York, I think that they were surprised by how good Dallas played against them, more specifically how good Jake Ottinger did. Let's start there. Braydon, should every team in the Western Conference be on high alert for the fact that Jake Ottinger has just come out and said, hey, I'm ready to be the next best goaltender in the Western Conference?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. He had a coming out party in his game that ended his season tonight with, I think, like close to 70 shots and over 125 shot attempts. And he looked cool as a cucumber the entire game. So I think there's something to say about Jake Ottinger, and the fact that Dallas also has Khudobin and Holtby. Like, move over, guys. This is Jake's team now, and I mean, I too was really impressed and surprised with how far Dallas could push Calgary in this series.
Elliott, obviously, I think it goes without saying how great Jake Ottinger was, but let's talk for a second too about how well defensively Dallas met the offensive power of Calgary. And if there's lessons to be taken from that for the Oilers, not to say that the Edmonton Oilers are built like Dallas is defensively. Dallas, actually a lot like Los Angeles, I think, plays a very difficult neutral zone game that neither the Oilers or the Calgary Flames have in their repertoire. However, it showed that the Calgary Flames can be beaten and that there are ways to do that. What are your takeaways from Dallas Calgary?
Dallas got a impressive defensive core, man. Heiskanen is something else to watch. Yeah. And Suter, they've got him on a value deal, shows some leadership, was good. Klingberg is obviously Klingberg. We'll see what happens with him because he doesn't have a contract next year. But I really hated watching this series. It was so boring. Only until it got close and there was game 6 and 7, obviously were a little bit better. But the styles that these two teams play, and it's like a Sutter team versus like a team with a good defensive core. It was mind-numbing at times. But hey, you got to do what you got to do to win. Calgary did it. Dallas gave them a run for their money. If Dallas had won this game,
they were pretty close.
It was, they both teams deserved the win in my mind, and it was that close of a series. And I don't know that I would have necessarily expected this. I think, Jordan, you were the closest one on this. I think we all took Calgary, but you were really quite vocal about the fact that Dallas is not an easy team to play against, and that we should be paying attention to this series. So props to you. You were right on that one.
Well, overall, I mean, the level of sort of, as I said, parity across the board was very impressive, I think, in round 1. That's the biggest takeaway for me, is how closely matched many of these series were. Obviously, most of them, 5 of them, going to game 7 is phenomenal in terms of the product and quality. Colorado sitting at home waiting for someone to join them in the second round for almost a week.
Played hockey in a week.
So there's some value in that, I guess, for them, or maybe St. Louis could get a little jump on them. But regardless, fantastic round 1. We'll turn our attention to round 2 here in a moment in topic 3. That is topic 2.
Do you like fast cars? Do you like when they race? Whether you're a seasoned Formula One fan or you've just discovered the rush of racing, check out the Pit Stop podcast presented by the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Join Jordan, Tyler, and Braydon each week as they recap every race as well as break down the biggest stories on and off the track, all before setting you up for the next race in the Formula One schedule. The Pit Stop podcast is available anywhere you get your podcast.
Okay, really quick here. Let's just give you a little preview and make some picks here on round 2. Obviously, our show's going long, so it is what it is. Let's go to the East first. Now we know what the matchups are. Carolina, New York is an interesting one because, again, both of these teams, they had to fight to get to the second round, maybe more so than was expected, but they both fought to get here. They don't come away completely unscathed, but for the most part, they're healthy. Other than Frederik Andersen, which we knew going into the playoffs, and Ranta has been very good for Carolina, but Shesterkin in New York, obviously fantastic goaltending, was challenged by Pittsburgh. So there's a lot of question marks. Let's just put it out there. Elliott, who you picking? Carolina, New York, and any initial thoughts on that matchup?
Yeah, I don't know. My heart says New York. My head says Carolina. I think a lot of this is going to come down to goaltending, and namely New York's goaltending, because I think Carolina is on the whole the better team. So I'm going to go with, I think I like Rod Brind'Amour too much. I think he's too good of a coach. I'm going to go with Carolina in 5.
Nice. All right. Braydon, you want to jump in there?
Well, first and foremost, I definitely believe Shesterkin will win the Vezina. Do you guys believe that he should be in that Hart final? He was one of the finalists in the Hart conversation.
I think he's definitely played well enough to have gotten votes. I was surprised that he was a finalist, but I think he's a shoo-in for the Vezina for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the only thing that New York has going for it. And I think in this next round, I think that Carolina, but I think it's going to be tough. And I think the reason that it's going to be tough is because of Shesterkin, and Carolina is going to win it in 6.
Wow. I mean, okay. I agree with both of you. I think goaltending is a big part of this, but I also think like don't sleep on New York's offense. I mean, Mika Zibanejad and Kreider have been really good all year. Kreider unbelievable all year, and New York has an opportunity here if they can exploit the fact that Carolina is playing the goaltender that was their backup all year, and they can get out to early leads in the series. They have the kind of horses to be able to win some games here in offensive driven ways. But obviously Carolina has a lot more sort of truculence, let's call it, a little bit more defensive ferocity. And obviously Tony DeAngelo is playing now against the team that didn't want him and pushed him out. So there's some more emotion for him to kind of come back with after a very ugly series against Boston on his behalf. But I guess for me, this is almost a toss. This is the first and
Carolina's deeper when it comes to that offense you're talking about, though.
Yeah, and that may be true, but again, you're up against the Vezina Trophy winner for the goaltending side of it. I think New York gets the edge on that side. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I would say this series has the potential to also go long. I'll give it to Carolina because I liked Carolina earlier, and I think I should stick with that. But I think this series could easily go 5 or 6. I'll go Carolina in 6. Let's
How about
jump
that,
to
3 Oilers fans taking Carolina and continue.
Yeah.
We've got the Panthers and the Lightning. It's the Battle of Florida. It's a rematch of round 1 of last year's playoffs. And obviously Tampa got the edge on Florida last year. Tampa and Florida, I wouldn't say it's the most sort of heated rivalry in the NHL, but they certainly now have played each other enough that they don't like each other. And there's certainly a lot of talent on both sides. Tampa Bay coming out of a much more physical series against Toronto than Florida found in their first round. So that'll be interesting. Florida's got a few players banged up too, which will be interesting to see how it plays out. Elliott, we'll go to you first. You've got Tampa and Florida. Which Floridian team comes out of round 2?
I'm going to say this is the year that Tampa Bay passes the torch to Florida, and Florida becomes the best team in the state. I'm going to take Florida, but I'm going to take them in 7. I think this is going to be this could be a very good series.
Braydon?
Oh boy, I for so long thought Florida was going to do this, and it's very likely that they still will. But something about what Tampa was able to do against Toronto makes me think that they might just be able to squeak this out against Florida. And I also think it's going to go to 7.
I don't think it's actually going to be that tight. I think we might be surprised by this one. I think this series is a 4 or 5 game series for Florida. I think that the fight that Tampa just came out of, I think will have emotionally and physically been a lot for them to go through. And I actually think that it gives Florida the advantage. I also think that you cannot sleep on the fact that Carter Verhaeghe is on an absolute tear. I mean, he has 2 points behind Connor McDavid for the entire point lead in the series. In 6 games, he's got 6 goals and 6 assists. I mean, just straight up in terms of the firepower that he's bringing, it's really, really impressive. And if he can play the way he's been playing moving into this series, Tampa could have another hard time on their hands contending with what Florida's got, because Florida comes in waves at you. And I think, as I said, Tampa had a harder series against Toronto. And sometimes we see that a team comes out of that first round battle and it's hard to get back up for round two. Maybe that won't be the case because they do have some history, but we'll see what happens. I'm going to take Florida in 5. All right, that's the East. Let's move to the West. We have Colorado, St. Louis. As we said, Colorado, well rested. Clearly the clubhouse leader here. Everyone's expecting the best out of them. There's some history here as well. These two teams faced each other last year. St. Louis got the better of Colorado. So much like Tampa and Florida, we have some opportunities for payback, revenge, or a sequel to what happened. Elliott, St. Louis or Colorado?
I think I'm going to take Colorado, and maybe that's the obvious pick and the easy pick, but I do think this is going to be a tough series for them. Again, they got to exercise some demons here, as you said. But I just think, they've got a week of rest, which is always, I always think is important. They've got a really strong team and a really strong system. Do I think it's going to be a blowout or a sweep? No, I would say Colorado in 6, and I think it's kind of fair.
Braydon?
Yeah, Colorado's going to win this, and it's going to be all thanks to that Cale Makar again. But I think St. Louis might take the first or the second game, but I think it would be 5. Remember, this is Ryan O'Reilly's former team, and he, having moved away from that, I think there's going to be a bit of spark behind the team to try to slow that Colorado team down, and I just don't think they're going to be able to match.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to bet against Colorado after what we've seen them do, but I would also point out Nashville took them to overtime in game 2. Don't forget that. This team has the opportunity, St. Louis has the opportunity to do similar things to Colorado by getting in the way in the neutral zone, making it difficult for them to play the game they want to play. Look, Cale Makar might score a lot of points, but he's doing that once his team has possession in the offensive zone. If you make it hard for Colorado to get and contain possession, it makes it much harder for Cale Makar to become a factor. You got to be disciplined. You can't put them on the power play, and you got to play smart defensive hockey. St. Louis has done that. They're a good team that way. That's how they won against Minnesota. But I think Colorado still has the edge because they're just such an aggressive team. I think you're both right. I don't think this is a sweep, but I also don't think this series is going longer than 5. So I'll give it to Colorado in 5. Let's finish it off with the one we know we will be most closely watching. Obviously, this has not happened since 91 or 92. It's been a very, very long time since we've had a Battle of Alberta in the playoffs. It's gone a few different ways, obviously mostly Edmonton's way, but most infamously Steve Smith in game 7.
I was just going to
putting
say,
the puck off of Grant Fuhr. That's a big bad one for Edmonton. In fact, I believe that was Edmonton's last game 7. Oh no, it was their second to last game 7 at home prior to last night. So look, Calgary comes in riding the better regular season record, but both teams just went seven games with teams both of them were expected to beat. So I think, not that I think either team will have found some kind of humility in that, but I think both teams have had experience coming out of those series that are different but valuable for each of them. I'm going to let Elliott take this first. Elliott, who do you have? Edmonton, Calgary, and in how many games?
I think this series is going to come down to the health of both teams. Tanev was out tonight. Draisaitl's hurt. There's bumps and bruises everywhere. But I do think it's a close series, but I think it's going to be a really tough, exhausting series. And the team that is tougher is going to be the one that wins, and not necessarily the most skill.
You got to pick one.
I'm going to take Calgary in 7.
Wow. In 7.
Oh, well,
that would be heartbreaking and brutal. All right. Braydon.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. Okay. I have a big issue with what you just said, Elliott, mainly because you are an Oilers fan. I know we're just making predictions based on statistics and what we think will happen, but this is a problem for me. When a guy like Wayne Gretzky comes out, makes his predictions, and predicts the team that has a statue of him outside their building, a history of him being a legend with his number in their rafters, predicting that the Calgary Flames will beat the Oilers. I think that it's sacrilegious. I think that it makes me crazy. Now, Calgary might very well beat the Oilers, but as a fan, I don't feel like that's a fair thing to do. I think the Edmonton Oilers will win this series, and I also think it will be 7. I can't believe you just did that, Elliott.
I have faith. I have faith in the Edmonton Oilers too. And the reason, I think there's a couple of reasons. One, I think that these teams match up well against each other offensively. Obviously, Calgary has been absolutely, literally on fire all season long offensively, and they have played better against Edmonton this season than they have probably for the last decade. However, I think Edmonton has a slight advantage in that I think there is I think there's just a different level that Edmonton's offense, especially Connor, and especially if Leon can be healthy, what he can contribute to this team, is capable of going to in emotional games that Calgary has yet to show us in the playoffs, right? Even in their most, emotional game 7, it's a 2-goal game. Nobody's found that next step. Now, sure, Edmonton scored a 2-goal game too, but they shut out LA at home. They beat LA at LA's game by not allowing LA to play their game at all. Dallas hung in that game. That game went to overtime because Dallas had just as equally, a fighting chance. I don't think LA really had a chance in game 7. By the time the third period had rolled around, Edmonton had pretty much controlled most of the game. Edmonton's capable of playing that kind of hockey. I also think Edmonton has a short memory. I don't think Edmonton gives a shit where this season series was. I think Edmonton is ready to go for this matchup in a different way. No. And maybe that's the same for Calgary. I do think it'll be a physical series. I think Edmonton has proven that they are very capable of being physical. You don't have to agree with his politics, but Josh Archibald has been an absolute pit bull out there for the Edmonton Oilers in the games that he played, taking over for Warren Fogle, who was a no-show. And Archibald is one of those guys who finishes every check. We've seen Zach Cassian come back to life and finish every check. We've seen Connor McDavid get out there and finish every check. And there's an opportunity for Edmonton, who I think has a slightly more mature core than what Calgary has, to get into Calgary's head in a different way. Matthew Tkachuk could be the most valuable player for Calgary or their worst asset, because if you can get in Matthew Tkachuk's head and get him running around and taking dumb penalties, putting Edmonton on the power play, you have an opportunity to exploit that. And we know that the emotions are going to get high in this series. It's about the team.
That's what I was going to say. That's a two-way street, right?
Of course it is. It's about whichever team is able to keep the cooler head. I think that's what it comes down to. That's right. It comes down to who can keep their heads cooler and who's able to manage the emotion in this, use it to their advantage, and we'll see what happens. I take Edmonton in 5. I think that they overpower Calgary in Calgary, at least one of those first 2 games in Calgary. And I don't think I think Edmonton has the advantage when they're at home. I think that they've now figured out how to play at home with this kind of crowd and emotion. And I think that they're able to push them. I'll be bold. I'll take Calgary in 5, Edmonton in 5. I actually like this matchup more and more, the more I think about how they line up. Now, as Elliott said, health is going to be a big thing. Leon Draisaitl's not there. That could be tricky, but look, Edmonton also went into LA and won game 6 without their biggest, baddest horse on the defensive side, which was Darnell Nurse, because the team found a way to play a style of hockey where they complemented each other and picked up those minutes together. Leon wasn't a huge factor in game 7. He played a lot of minutes, but he wasn't a huge factor. It proved to me that the Oilers, especially if they played 11 and another 11 and 7 sort of lineup, they'll be able to shuffle guys in and out to get onto the side with Connor, and guys have played well. Yamo's played well up there. Kane's played really well up there with Connor. So I think there's options for Edmonton that Calgary hasn't yet seen, and we'll wait and see what happens. But it could go one of 2 ways. This could be over real quick, or it could be a long fight too. So I think I'm in 5. I think that it'll be fun to see Edmonton push Calgary around.
Well, I'll either be right or
travel
happy.
Days too, right?
You'll either be right or happy. That's right, Elliott. That's a great way to live. But under no circumstances is Mike Smith not starting game 1 on Wednesday night. I'm sorry. That is insane. You don't rest now. Here's the weird one. This series is all over the map in terms of start times. So we have a 7:30 p.m. start on Wednesday. We have a
was the schedule out? I didn't even see the schedule.
It's out right now. Yeah, it came out. So game 1 is Wednesday. It's 7:30 p.m. Mountain. Then you have an 8:30 p.m. Mountain start on Friday night. Then you have a 6 p.m. Mountain start on Sunday. Then you have a 8:30 again p.m. Mountains. Oh, pardon me, a 7:30 p.m. Mountain start again on Tuesday, the 24th of May for game 4. So every single start time for the first 4 games is completely different. They start playing games tomorrow. Yeah, there is.
Oh no,
one,
yeah, it's Tuesday. Sorry, I forgot
yeah.
we're past midnight.
That's right. No, the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning play Tuesday, as well as the Colorado Avalanche, St. Louis Blues. But the Oilers Calgary series and the New York Carolina series, the series that ended basically tonight for the Calgary and New York series, they got the extra day off, so they start Wednesday. So there you go. That's pretty much it for our show this week. Look, lots more hockey to be played, lots more emotions to be exuded and spill out all over the place. Look, it should be a lot more fun now that there's only four games to follow each, or 2 games each night, 4 games each 2-night series. Look, this is going to be fun. Edmonton, Calgary, Battle of Alberta. You're going to get your money's worth either way. And at the end of the day, it's going to be one for the ages, win or lose for the Oilers. It'll be one of those series that they've already exceeded, I think, Elliott's expectations, a lot of people's expectations. You got through round 1. You're only one of 8 teams left. That's pretty good.
With house money, and that's the best place to be.
That's right. And look, if the Edmonton Oilers are going into this series, the underdog, I'll take that all day. I'll take that all day because the pressure comes off. And the pressure's never off when you have Connor McDavid, but the pressure comes off a little bit. Tuesday night, don't miss it. That'll be game 1, round 2. This was a fun show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That was Hat-Trick. Hat-Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braydon Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.